Hello, my name is Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video. This week is a big blank game week. Got there in the end, and we are going to be going through a free hit team for this week to let you know the sort of teams that you should be aiming to get towards this week.
So, as Ben alluded to, it's not a blink game week, it is a blank game week, and we're going to take you through the best free hit draft possible. As you can see on screen, there's a few selections in there that's a little bit different from maybe other free hit drafts that you've seen around content creators, and we're going to dive in. Just a little side note, Ben is free hitting this week, and I've made this free hit draft without Ben's sort of input, so we'll have a little decision making to see who he thinks is the best pick. So we're starting off in goal. We've got Kaminsky in goal, obviously Forest at home. I think on these two picks, obviously there's a Luton defender in the defence as well. It's not necessarily, I think Luton will keep a clean sheet this week, but I think Kaminsky's good for save points. I also think Doughty's good going forwards. And in this sort of scenario, I think you're going to have to double up on a defence. All the fixtures aren't great for clean sheet potential. The highest clean sheet potential is actually Brentford at 32%, which I think's quite high given the fact that Burnley are a much better defensive team than offensive team in the recent weeks, should I say. So, yeah, I've gone with Luton. Forest haven't won in their last 7. What's your thoughts on that Luton defence, Ben? Is that something that you've considered, having at least 1 or potentially 2?
Yeah, I think by the time my free hit comes round, I'm going to have one Luton defender. I think the Forest fixture is probably the best one on paper for any team. It just so happens it's the worst team that have that fixture, which is unfortunate. But yes, it's a tough one because obviously with the better teams like Tottenham, you're going to want to go attacking with the triple that you go for in this. So I do think Kaminsky is a decent option, and I also think Flecken has the potential. If he gets the save points, I think is the key here. It depends how Burnley come out and how Burnley play. Whereas I think it's a little bit safer for like a bit of a higher baseline of points for Kaminsky anyway.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. And then looking elsewhere in the defence, obviously Reguilon, he obviously missed game week 28 with a hamstring injury. Thomas Frank has said that he should be available for game week 29. I mean, worst case scenario here, if you're on a free hit, maybe go Roslev. He's the right wing back in that sort of setup. Reguilon is the better pick though if you're going between the two, just because of how offensive he is. And then Pedro Porro to finish it off. He's the third, I guess you would say, Spurs player that we've chosen. I think it's more so a case because the defensive options are so bad rather than him being necessarily so good. Obviously, he's on set pieces, could get an attack in return, but Luton away is not an easy fixture, is it, Ben?
No, not at all. And I think obviously there's a danger there going with that. And like you said, I think you just got to go with free and roll with that. The free at the back is going to be the best formation to go for a free hit because the options are pretty limited in terms of defenders. To be honest, there's like 1 or 2 that I'd be happy with. Reguilon being one of them that's an injury concern. So, yeah, I'd be looking sort of trying to make sure that you get 3 playing defenders at a minimum and then go from there.
Yeah, I think the key as well with defenders, you want to make sure that they offer some sort of attacking threat as well, because like we alluded to at the start, the clean sheets are going to be super hard to come by, and if you do land a clean sheet this week, you'll be super lucky. So yeah, try and get some attacking returns as well. Moving on into the midfield, we've got Leon Bailey with West Ham away. Not a bad fixture there. Obviously, both teams do play midweek on Thursday night in their respective European competitions. So it will be an interesting one to see how that sort of develops in terms of who plays the most minutes and stuff like that. Obviously, Villa and Ajax drew 0-0. West Ham lost 1-0 to Freiburg. So there's good potential for those fixtures to potentially go to extra time. Obviously, you've got the double up of the Spurs midfielders with Son and Maddison. I think these are the 2 key assets to own for this week from Spurs. Son, for me, probably going to be my captain for this game week as well. A nice fixture there against Fulham from an offensive point of view. And then finally, Jarrod Bowen with Villa at home. Obviously, Bowen scored a hat-trick a couple of weeks ago at home against that Brentford side, returned against Everton, and then blanked against Burnley. What's your thoughts on that midfield, Ben? Is there anyone there that you think sort of missing out, or would you say that they're all pretty standard?
It's all really dependent on how each team gets on in Europe this week. Like if Villa have a tough one, then I'd be tempted to go Kudus just for the fact that that Villa defence doesn't look too great at the moment, looks a little bit leaky, and they're off the back of a couple of bad performances. So you could be tempted by him. Other options, I mean, Nottingham Forest you could go to. Yes, they've been a little bit inconsistent, but someone like Gibbs White, Elanga maybe. you could consider as an option. But yeah, again, it's very template in terms of the team that we'll be looking at because the options are a little bit more limited. If you were going sort of outside the box as well, maybe you'd look at someone from Brentford if you think they're going to score a couple of goals. So you could even go like Janelt potentially. Like it's a little bit of a stretch, but yeah, again the options are slightly limited, but the good options that we have are very good options for this game week.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And obviously, some players that Ben mentioned there, Gibbs White, Elanga. I think Elanga would be in a lot of free hit drafts this week if he wasn't benched in game week 28. Him and Awoniyi both probably would have been in a lot more drafts if they had started that game against Brighton, but both were on the bench. Both only played 18 minutes. Bit of a weird one from Nuno. I think Elanga's been arguably Nottingham Forest's best attacker this season, so we'll wait to be seen. I know a lot of people going Gibbs White for the penalties potentially, but then Chris Wood could also be back, which could sort of limit that. So I think for that fourth midfielder, it's a really difficult pick. And again, like Ben mentioned, sort of those Europa League and Conference League fixtures will sort of decide upon who's the best option. Moving on into the attack, we've got double Brentford attack, which is, for me, I think if I was free hitting, I'd be doing this for sure with Visser and Tony. Visser's scored in his last 3 games for Brentford. I know Tony's blanked in his last 4, but he is on penalties against a Burnley side who literally are just so bad at defending. Like even against West Ham, they're 2-0 up at half time. The goal they concede straight after half time is just such schoolboy stuff. For me, they'd be the team that I'd be targeting from an offensive point of view, and I think these two are the best assets. And obviously, Ollie Watkins is going to be in there. He'll be over 100% effective owned at most ranks. You see a lot of people potentially captaining this week. What's your thoughts on all those 3, Ben?
Yeah, again, template, and I think for a good reason. You could probably consider Carlton Morris as well. He'll be fairly highly owned just because of the guys that are not free hitting this week. A decent fixture as well against an out of sorts Forest side. But yeah, Visser, Tony, probably the best options in terms of free hittable players. Everyone's going to have Ollie Watkins anyway. In terms of other options, again, slightly limited. Maybe you could look at a Burnley attacker because Brentford as well aren't too great defensively either. But yeah, like I said, Tony is the guy that's going to be on set pieces and penalties. Visser's the guy in form, and Watkins is Ollie Watkins. Like everyone's going to have him. So outside of there, there's a couple of options you could look at. Like you said, at 1 year, if he wasn't benched last week, you'd be considering him for sure. But yeah, other than that, you're looking at sort of maybe your left field options in terms of what you're potentially going to go for.
Yeah, I don't think even having a left field option, I think Visser will probably be quite low owned. He's a bit left field to be honest, but having one of those or 2 of those in a free hit is definitely sort of valuable to have. I think, I've seen a lot of people talking about Fofana this week after he scored that worldie against West Ham. Obviously returned a couple of weeks ago as well. Someone like that, if you can nail a punt this week, it's going to be crucial because, like you say, non-free hitters are going to have the likes of Tony, Watkins, Son, Maddison, all of these guys. So your upside from that is not going to be too much. You're going to need to nail those alternative picks at the guys who can't get all their 11 fielded to sort of nail those guys instead. So it should be interesting. On the bench, just a few differential options as we sort of discuss the striker spot. James Trafford against Brentford. We're talking about save points. I think he gets a lot of saves just for sheerly the amount of shots that Burnley concede. Kudus, obviously Ben, you mentioned him as sort of if Bailey versus Kudus, whoever gets almost less minutes in Europe for those 2 guys. Would you consider him? Obviously, in terms of data, Kudus is the 3rd best West Ham midfielder. Only Bowen's the best, and then Ward-Prowse from open play. Would you consider Ward-Prowse, or would you go with Kudus from an attacking point of view?
I think you can consider Ward-Prowse, but you're also reliant on set pieces and penalties then. And you don't sort of want to be too reliant on the penalty sort of side of things, especially as West Ham don't tend to sort of really attack loads and loads and loads. Yeah. That being said, they could score 3 or 4 against Villa, and if they do, I think you'd rather have Kudus in there than Ward-Prowse because he'll be more involved in the attacking play and open play anyway. So I think I'd prefer Kudus just for that perspective, but I do see the appeal of James Ward-Prowse if you were to be looking at that.
Yeah, and then some defensive options as well. Obviously, Vladimir Soufal, West Ham don't tend to keep clean sheets too often, but he's getting a couple of attack and returns in recent weeks. As Ben mentions, Villa's defence not the strongest at the moment. They keep rotating at left back as well, so that could be a side to sort of concentrate down along with Kudus with Soufal. And then there's Murillo as well from Nottingham Forest, probably the most nailed Forest defender. Potentially Nico Williams as well if you're looking for more attacking threat. We discussed him last week on our transfer plans video. One of those two guys, if you think Luton won't score, but a caveat to that is that Luton have scored in every single Premier League game since the beginning of November, so they tend to score all the time. They even managed it in stoppage time against Crystal Palace at the weekend. What's your thoughts defensively, Ben? Is it still sort of just like the three and then sort of work it out for the rest, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's good. We could genuinely have a week where no one keeps a clean sheet, which is why I think you should just pile on the attackers. The fixtures aren't too great. We know they're not. I think you'll be lucky to get one or two clean sheets in your team this week. So for me, the thought process is just get the ones that are nailed. I wouldn't put too much thought into those defenders. Like there's the ones that stand out and pick themselves, and then just build around that based on sort of what teams you've got left to pick from and that sort of thing. So yeah, it would be a case of sort of looking at that perspective and not trying to take too much time in picking those guys that probably won't get you many points anyway.
Okay, so that wraps up our Game Week 29 free hit draft. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Are you free hitting this week like Ben, or are you sort of trying to stay clear and use it later on like me, or maybe even used it already? Let us know in the comments.
And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
Later. Have a good game week, everyone.